Hello, boys and girls. This is the Family Tree, a health and family life presentation. In this discussion, we will listen to a story that describes the family tree of Tavon and Chantel. We will talk about making decisions, and we will explore what it means to empower yourself in order to make good decisions for your future. What is a family tree? A family tree is a diagram showing different generations of a family. In today's story, we will meet two young people who will give us an inside look at some of the branches of their family tree. I would like to introduce you to two young people. Meet Tavon. Tavon is 12 years old. Meet Chantel. Chantel is 11 years old, and this is the story of their family tree. Are you ready? It's story time. Let's start at the beginning. So now that you've been introduced to Tavon and Chantel, I would like you to meet their brothers, sisters, and cousins, as well as the rest of their family. Right now, Tavon and Chantel live with their grandmother, mother, their mother's husband, a brother, a sister, an aunt who's their mother's sister, and a cousin. But let's start by going back about 16 years and learning more about Tavon and Chantel's family. One Saturday night, Mary meets Al at a party at her friend's house. Al is 20 years old and he looks good. He and Mary spend a lot of time together at the party. Al starts to visit Mary at her house, although Mary's mother, Esther, who is Tavon and Chantel's grandmother, says Mary needs to spend more time on her homework and less time with Al. After a while, Mary starts going over to Al's house. Al lives with his grandmother and two older cousins. Mary and Al are alone there quite a bit. It isn't long before Al and Mary start to have sex. 2 months later, Mary finds out she is pregnant. Mary has a little boy, and this little boy is Tavon. Mary sees less of Al after Tavon is born, although Al comes by with gifts sometimes. Mary goes back to school, so Mary's mother, Esther, takes care of Tavon most of the time. This is Esther's house, and we're going to start putting together the family tree. So right now, living in Esther's house is Mary and Tavon. Back to the story. One evening, Mary is hanging with some friends and she meets John. John has a car and he invites Mary to go riding with him. Mary likes John and agrees to go with him. John and Mary date for a couple of years, and during that time, Mary becomes pregnant again and has a little girl. This little girl is Chantel. After a couple of years, John and Mary break up and John moves to another island in search of a job. Now we're back to Esther's house where we are building the family tree. We have Mary, of course, who is the mother of Tavon, whose dad is Al, and now Mary also has a daughter whose name is, that's right, Chantel, and Chantel's dad is John. Very good. Now, David is an old friend of Mary's, and Mary has known him for many years. David is 25 years old, and he works for a construction company. David recently moved out of the house he was sharing with his girlfriend Yvonne and their child Brian, who's 7 years old. David and Mary start seeing each other. In about a year, they get married. 2 years later, Tamika is born, and a year later, Corey is born. David and Mary have their own apartment, and Tavon, who still lives with his grandmother Esther, starts to spend weekends with them. David's son Brian lives with his mother Yvonne. All right, so let's take another look at the family tree. In Esther's house, of course, we have Tavon and Chantel who are living with their grandmother. However, in this part of the story, Mary got married and her husband's name is, that's right, David. Together, Mary and David, how many children do they have? Yes, they have two more children, and their names are Tamika and Corey. Very good. And now we have Tavon, and why do you think Tavon is here at Mary's apartment? That's right, because sometimes he spends weekends at their home. Let's move to the present. David and Mary have moved back in with Mary's mother Esther because David lost his construction job last year. Mary's sister Ebony, who is Tavon and Chantel's aunt, and her 2-year-old son Omar are also living with Esther. Okay, let's see if we can finish off this family tree. So we know that this is Esther's house, so of course she lives here. But who else is living here now? We have Mary and Mary's first two children, Tavon, whose dad is Al, Chantel, whose dad is John. But then Mary got herself a husband, correct? And now she is married to David. Together, Mary and David had two more children, and their names are Tamika and Corey. But this family isn't the only family living with Grammy Esther. Who else is living here? Yes, Mary's sister lives here, and this is the aunt of her children. So Ebony is Mary's sister, and Ebony also has a son, and his name is Omar. Great job. You are great listeners. Now that the story is over, we have some big decisions to talk about. Now, we must make decisions every day of our lives, both big and small. These decisions can affect the rest of our lives. Sometimes we don't make the effort to decide what will happen to us. Instead, we just let whatever happens happen. When you empower yourself, you are taking control of your life and the decisions you make. At the end of this curriculum, you would have received all the tools you need in order to empower yourselves and be confident in your decision-making abilities. We will discuss and practice ways in which you can take control of your decision-making and ultimately your future. Throughout this year, you will become very familiar with this poster, which will teach you the steps of decision making. Actually, of good decision making. Remember the letters SODA. Yeah, that spells soda. I hate to go, but now that this video is coming to an end, it's discussion time. I wish to thank you for your attention. You have been awesome listeners. My name is Miss Shavonna McMasters, and it has been a pleasure introducing you to Tavon, Chantel, and all the members of their family.